Picture a man standing alone on a wall at night. Everyone below him in that city is asleep. The streets are quiet, the windows dark, the whole place unaware. Then he hears something in the dark past the ridge. Footsteps that shouldn't be there. More than one set moving together. And he's got seconds to decide. Sound the alarm and risk looking foolish if it's nothing. Or stay quiet and hope the danger passes on its own. That's not a real city, and it was never meant to be one. That's the picture God gave a prophet named Ezekiel for something a lot closer to home than an actual wall. And he's still using that picture on men tonight. Fathers, husbands, anyone leading even one other soul, whether you've ever thought about your own life in these terms or not. Ezekiel 33 lays it out. God tells him, "I've made you a watchman. When I speak, you warn them, and if the danger comes and you never sounded the alarm, the one who died is responsible for their own sin, but their blood is on your hands." Read that twice, because most men skim right past the actual weight of what's being said here. The watchman isn't judged for the enemy showing up. Enemies always show up. That was never the question. He's judged for what he did or didn't do once he heard them coming. If you're a father, a husband, an elder, or a man other people quietly follow without you ever announcing it, that verse is talking directly to you tonight, not to some ancient soldier standing on a literal wall somewhere. To you right now, over your own household, your own mind, everyone close enough to feel your influence, whether you meant to have that much or not. So here's the only question that matters this week. Are you actually watching your post, or have you just been standing there looking like you are? Before we get into what you're guarding, there's a lie we need to kill first. Because it's the reason good men never get appointed to anything real. Calling is free. Preparation costs you something. Anyone can get a calling from God. You could be sitting in a service half asleep, barely paying attention to the sermon, and still feel Him mark your name for something. That part's cheap. He's generous with it, almost reckless in how freely He hands it out. But the men who actually get used, who get trusted with real weight in their homes and in their communities, aren't the ones who heard the loudest calling. They're the ones who paid for the years of preparation that came after it, when nobody was watching or clapping. 1 Samuel 22 has a line that stopped me the first time I really read it. David's on the run from Saul, hiding wherever he can find shelter, and an Edomite named Doeg walks up and rats him out to the king without a second thought. He says, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, and Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him." Somebody had been watching David that closely, keeping track of habits nobody else even thought mattered at the time. That should unsettle you a little. Long before the crown, before anyone was clapping, somebody already knew exactly what he did when nobody important was around to see it. Your unseen hours as a man are never actually unseen. Somebody, even if it's only God, is always keeping track of what you do when applause isn't scheduled. Samuel had already anointed David king years earlier. That calling was already public knowledge, already the talk of the region probably. But there was a whole wilderness stretched out between the oil on his head and the actual throne. Years of it. And it was in that gap, hiding in caves, doing nothing anyone would call impressive, that his character actually got built. While everyone else was still just waiting for the crown to show up. Appointment doesn't come from how loud your calling sounded when it first showed up. It gets earned slowly, in the years nobody was filming, and nobody would have believed you if you told them. Luke 16 verse 10 says it plainly, without leaving any room to argue about what it actually means. Whoever's faithful with very little is faithful with much, and whoever's dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much too. A man's appointment doesn't get earned at the conference, or even at the altar call, as real as that moment might have been for you. It gets earned on the Tuesday afternoon nobody's checking on you, and you do right by your family anyway. God isn't scouting for men who perform well when the room is full. Plenty of men can pull that off for an hour on a stage. He's looking for the ones who are the exact same man when it's empty, when there's no applause scheduled, and no one keeping score but him. So if you've spent years calling yourself called, wondering why the appointment hasn't come, sit with this instead of nodding along. What have you actually been faithful with in the dark, where nobody was ever going to find out either way? Now to what you're actually guarding as a man. Not stone walls, not an actual wilderness. 4 areas inside your own life. And if even one goes unwatched, everything you're building on top of it is already compromised. Your marriage, your kids, your influence, no matter how good it looks from the outside to everyone else watching. First, your emotions. Proverbs 25 verse 28 says a man with no self-control is like a city with its walls torn down. Every man feels things. That was never the failure being described. This is about a man whose own emotions kicked in his own gate from the inside, so anything at all can walk in and take whatever it wants from the people who depend on him. I've watched a grown man lose his temper in front of his own kids and somehow still think he was the one protecting them in that moment. He wasn't, not even close. In that moment, he was the danger. The very household he was supposed to guard got hurt by his own hands, nobody else's. Don't suppress it, that just buries the problem and calls it fixed. Name what you're feeling before it gets to name you instead. Say it out loud to God. Anger, insecurity, whatever it actually is. I've done this myself more than once, snapped at my own house over something that had nothing to do with them, and called it stress instead of what it actually was. A man who let his own feelings run the room, instead of running them himself. A man who governs his emotions instead of being governed by them, is a man his family can actually trust. Not because he stopped feeling anything, but because what he feels no longer decides what he does to the people he loves the most. Second, your thoughts. 2 Corinthians 10 gives us the actual language of war. We tear down arguments and every proud thing that sets itself against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. Tear down, take captive. These are not gentle words. Paul's not describing a peaceful garden where thoughts wander through whenever they feel like it. He's describing a checkpoint where every thought gets stopped and questioned before it's allowed anywhere near a decision that affects your family. Proverbs 4 verse 23 tells you why this matters so much. Above everything, guard your heart because your whole life flows out of it. Whatever's happening in your head today is upstream of whatever you do to the people who love you tomorrow. Most men don't fail their families in one big dramatic moment. They fail them in a few thousand small unguarded thoughts nobody ever saw, entertained quietly for months until the thought finally demanded to become something real and undeniable. By the time everyone else can see the failure, the actual battle got lost a long time earlier in a mind that stopped taking anything captive. That's the part that should scare you a little, if you're honest with yourself for a minute. Not the dramatic sins everybody would notice right away. The quiet ones you kept feeding without telling a single soul. A man who guards his thought life stops being surprised by his own actions, because he already dealt with the thought long before it became a decision that hurts somebody he loves. Third, your appetite. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 12. I have the right to do anything, Paul says, but not everything's good for me, and I won't be mastered by anything. Sit with that last part for a second. Not mastered. Paul isn't handing you a list of forbidden items. He's drawing a line between a man who uses something and a man who's quietly being used by it instead, without ever admitting that's what's happening. Appetite isn't only food, though for plenty of you it is exactly that. It's the pull toward more comfort, more of whatever your body wants the second it wants it. Screens, spending, whatever your particular flesh reaches for first. Nobody talks about this one as much as the other three, probably because it feels too small and too private to preach on from a stage. It's rarely small in practice. Leave it unwatched and it doesn't ask permission, it just takes the wheel, and your family is stuck living with a decision you don't even remember consciously making. Practice the word no somewhere small, before you ever need it somewhere. It'll cost your household everything. If you can't say no to a second plate, that discipline isn't going to magically show up the day it actually matters. This one's boring to talk about, I know. There's nothing dramatic about closing a laptop or skipping dessert, but boring disciplines are exactly what build a man his family can't be blindsided by later. A man whose private habits match the version of himself he presents in public. A man who governs his appetite proves something to himself, in private, that no crisis later can shake loose from him. Fourth, your tongue. Proverbs 18 verse 21 doesn't soften anything here. The tongue holds the power of life and death, and whoever loves using it will eat what it produces. Sit with how strong that language actually is. This is power over life and death sitting behind your teeth every single day, way past simple influence, and most of the time it goes completely unmonitored around the people closest to you. The same mouth that builds a household on Monday can wreck it by Friday if it goes unwatched for even one bad night. And children, in my experience, remember the Friday version far longer than they remember the Monday one. Some of you grew up hearing a father's words that still play back in your head decades later, and not the encouraging kind. Words don't just land in a moment and disappear. They get recorded somewhere inside a child and replayed for years, sometimes for a whole lifetime, long after the man who said them has forgotten he ever did. Pause before the sentence. Not silence forever, just a pause long enough to ask whether this is going to build your family up or tear them down. Before a single word gets out. 4 areas: emotions, thoughts, appetite, tongue. Every one of them guarded in private. long before anyone ever sees whatever your faithfulness eventually earns you as a father, a husband, or a leader. Here's the whole thing put together, plainly, one more time. A watchman was never actually tested by the enemy showing up. That was never the real question being asked of him. He was tested by whether he stayed awake long enough to sound the alarm before it was too late. Calling put you on this post. Preparation is the price you pay while you're standing on that post, day after ordinary day. And real appointment, the kind that carries actual weight in your home and doesn't collapse the first time it's tested, only ever comes to the men who stayed faithful in the small rooms first, the ones nobody else was ever watching or ever going to know about. So don't ask God for a bigger calling tonight, brother. You've probably already got more callings sitting on you than you've actually stewarded well. Ask Him instead to find you faithful right where you already are, in the room nobody's watching, with the people who need you to be the same man in private that you are on a stage. 4 areas. That's the whole assignment for a man who genuinely wants to lead something real and lasting. Not complicated, just costly. And costly in ways that never get mentioned from a stage or filmed for anyone to see. If any of this landed on you, don't just scroll past it like every other night. Go to the comments and write, "God is my strength in every battle." Let that be you saying out loud that you're done sleeping at your post. Send this to a man who needs to hear it before something breaks in his home, not after. And if you want more truth like this, subscribe and stay close. One last thing before you go. Ezekiel 33 doesn't end with condemnation. It hands responsibility back to you. A watchman who stays awake and sounds the alarm has done his part, whether the people around him listen or not. You were never responsible for outcomes you never had control over. You were only ever responsible for whether you stayed faithful at your post. Somewhere tonight, there's a man who fell asleep at his post years ago and never even noticed it happening. It probably didn't feel like falling asleep at all. It felt like getting tired, getting busy, getting comfortable, one ordinary night at a time, until years had quietly passed, and his own household stopped hearing from him what a father, a husband, and a leader is actually supposed to sound like. If that's you, let this be the sound waking you up right now. Stay awake, brother. Your post is still yours to keep.